So we're here today for 10 tips for increasing Instagram engagement for your business. And presenting today is Lizzie MacNeill from Later. She's the PR and partnerships lead.
Mic isn't on? Or it's not loud?
Oh, it's on. Can you hear me? I'll talk right into it, okay? I'll try not to spit into it. All right. So we've got Lizzie MacNeill here today from Later. She's the PR and partnerships lead. Thanks very much for coming today, Lizzie. Founded as the first to market Instagram scheduler in 2014, Later, formerly Latergram, has grown from a simple Instagram tool to the #1 visual marketing platform for Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest. Now, with over 2 million users globally, Later is a member of the Instagram Partner Program and a Pinterest marketing partner. Lizzie MacNeill is the PR and partnerships lead at Later. Let's welcome Lizzie. Thanks, guys.
Hey, guys. I think I just... Oh, there we go. Good. It's still in. Can you hear me okay? Not loud enough? What if I use this? Is that better? Okay, awesome. So hi, everybody. I'm Lizzie, and as we just talked about, I'm with Later. So if you've not heard of Later, a lot of people have heard of Latergram, specifically here in Vancouver. But it kind of started like that, where people would essentially like want to schedule photos and videos to Instagram or post something from later on, and that's kind of basically how our company was born. But we are like a social media software company. That's primarily what we do. A little bit of background on me specifically. I've had about 10 years of experience in social media marketing. So now I rep partnerships and PR at Later, but before that did social media for, managed the social team at Hockey Canada, did social on the brand side for Sage, another Vancouver company as well. So have a lot of experience in the fields of social. And then I'm also an instructor at Mount Royal University in Calgary teaching social media and digital marketing. So that said, I'm very comfortable with at any time in the presentation, if you have a question or something comes up that you want me to expand on, or you have like something you kind of want to key in on that is valuable for you, please feel free to just raise your hand at any time and we can address it in the moment. Or if you want to, we can save questions to the end and then go through a bunch. So I'm totally comfortable with that. Just let me know kind of if you do have anything that comes up. I'm more than happy to kind of like riff on that as we go too. So a little bit of background on Instagram and how it's really changed the marketing space as well. So there's 1 billion active monthly users on Instagram now. To give you a scale of that, there's 2 billion active monthlies on Facebook, which is pretty crazy considering that Instagram's only been around for really a few years, especially in the context of Facebook. So it's hugely growing. It's becoming something that Facebook obviously has really invested in since purchasing them, and it's becoming like a much more robust organization, which means that like every time that you're seeing the Instagram app, it seems like every other day they're changing a feature or adding something new or doing something different. So it is becoming like more of a challenge to really stay on the edge of what they're doing and then how to kind of capture that opportunity for your business as well. So we'll kind of go over like some of the more recent opportunities that I think apply to everybody and then key into those a little bit more too through this talk. But the inspiring thing I think for me is that it is really right now the time for small businesses. And so I think you guys, a lot of you guys fit into this category of small businesses, but essentially what social media has kind of done within the marketing space is almost create like an equalization in terms of marketing. So if you look at old school marketing, a lot of it was based on like, do you have millions of dollars to have a crazy campaign and buy all these TV ads and have this creative firepower behind your organization to look professional and to look cool and attract your target market? And that kind of made things really difficult for small businesses. Like, how are you going to compete with Patagonia or Coca-Cola or whoever it is in order to make your brand really stand out? But now that social media has become such a big tool that all of us can use, like every time Instagram does an update, you and me and the social media manager at Coca-Cola are on a level playing field with how we adopt these technologies, which I think is really nice in a way, because it gives us all kind of more of a chance to really be like a leader in these fields and try new things, because we all don't have a 20-person PR department that's like, oh, actually, like, we can't use IGTV because if we do, we have to have everything improved by this whole department of people. Like, we can actually act on things like as they happen, which is really, really nice. So it's kind of leveled the playing field in that way. And then also, like, as we'll cover here, a lot of it is about aesthetic too, so how things look. And obviously Instagram being a visual platform, this is a huge part of what your strategy should be focused on. The way I like to think of this in terms of aesthetic is if you think about what a brand is and what it encapsulates, like I'll give you an example of Sage. Like, how many of you guys are familiar with that brand? Pretty familiar in Vancouver, or familiar-ish? So obviously like a Canadian aromatherapy company, like things that, because I can say things, I don't work there anymore. So when I just first started with them, I was like, very fancy brand, like, appeals to a target market that has a lot of money to spend on peppermint oil. Things like that, like, made me think of like wood, spa environments, even like the way that their brand looks and feels. Like, it gives you an idea from your own branding package, whatever your company logo is, your primary colors, your sort of look and feel, whether you realize it or not, like your brand kind of has an image behind it. And that's kind of like the ingredients that give you something to work with on Instagram and build from. So if you think of like, if I was to say what my brand is, like, how could I create a mood board or a setting for what I think that my brand is or what I want it to be? So a lot of people are thinking about things like, in terms of Instagram, what that can look like is, do you want it to be like a bright and airy kind of Instagram feed? Do you want it to be something that's like more moody and coastal and West Coast, like Postmark is doing? So these kinds of things like help you to establish consistency and patterns, and these are really what help you build a following on these visual platforms. Especially, I think, like, now it's becoming more of a trend, especially for influencers, to not edit things quite as much. But I think that you'll see that all the brands that are successful do have like a very strong visual identity, and they keep that identity consistent. So I think the more that you can kind of work on crafting that for your brand, the more successful you're going to be on the platform. And now a big part of that is, how do you, have this, I guess, for example, like looking at their feed, and why I picked that for this slide in particular is the quality of the photography is similar. Like the messaging in terms of like where this is in the world is similar. The kind of customer I think that would be attracted to this is similar. These are all like very intentional choices that we can make to make your Instagram strategy really successful. And now that extends over to Instagram stories and IGTV and these kind of formats that are a lot more, like fast-paced in 24 hours than what is going to go on your feed, obviously. So it doesn't have to be the exact same quality standard. But at the same time, the more that you can kind of bring that same consistency to what you see on your feed and what you see elsewhere on Instagram, the more engaging your content is really going to be. I think we look at this later a bit more too, but I just kind of wanted to give you guys as many takeaways as possible for apps and tools that I think are useful. So if you haven't checked out Canva, you definitely need to. They have like an amazing design resources. Most of them are for free, or you can even go on a free month trial and create things like your own visual branding package and have like your logos and your typography and your colors and everything picked. And then just kind of go from there as a starting point. If you're creating a new business, it's a great tool to check out. They're also awesome for like Instagram stories, templates, anything like that, where you want to build some consistency in what you're doing. Unfold is an amazing Instagram stories editing app as well. They have a lot of really cool templates that make your stuff look very pro, even though we're doing it. We're not designers by trade. So they're worth checking out. And then there's a lot of apps that are just basically for photo editing, which is kind of like a core thing for, regardless if it's Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, photo editing is definitely the thing that kind of brings your photos from average to next level. Almost everybody out there that has a professional Instagram account is editing their photos, even just slightly, to make them look a little bit better. So I would definitely recommend using Tezza, which is a new app, really cool one for templates as well. Lightroom is another really great one. Visco, if you've heard of Visco girls, that's like the new trend for even like young people in high school and stuff are editing their photos before they put them on Instagram. It's not just brands. So definitely worth checking out. It's going to make your life a lot easier so that you don't have to spend quite as much time trying to achieve that aesthetic. The other tip is if you're just building one for the first time and you are trying to build consistency, people will use, let's say, Lightroom or Visco or whatever it is and just pick like a couple of different filters that maybe they've edited so that to them that feels like their brand, and then they'll use that same setting consistently. Because it will take, like, even if it's a generic photo, it gives it at least kind of a sameness when you're editing with the same sort of set of photo conditions. So I would definitely recommend that if you're just getting started with aesthetic. So now we'll go into some more kind of general Instagram engagement tips. The first one really being that Instagram has gamed the system in terms of their algorithm to really support accounts that are using all their new features. So what I mean by that is every time that Instagram announces something new, like for example, when they did announce IGTV, they put so much of their kind of internal resources behind that, and they really showcase that within their app and look for case studies and examples of people that are really doing it well. So whenever you can take something, an opportunity to use something new, I would definitely recommend doing it because it does have a much more natural chance of getting seen by more people just because the algorithm does tend to favor these kinds of things. Switching to an Instagram business profile, I think a lot of you guys are probably already using an Instagram business profile if you're working for a brewery or another organization, but a lot of people still aren't. There was a big debate about whether or not using business profiles was really worth it because I think a lot of people thought it was a cash grab, thinking like, oh, they're just going to take away all my organic engagement and then basically trade me for me having to spend ad dollars to get the same result. But in my view, what it actually has done is provided the opportunity for you to showcase your business properly with the right links on top and like allowing you a lot more access to different features that really do help you. It's definitely worth doing. I think there's no question about it now. Even just things like when we're working with them as an Instagram partner, they'll release capabilities to us like auto publish. So later if you plan your Instagram calendar and later and you're like, I want to publish this tomorrow at 3 p.m., we can set that live to auto publish for you. We can't do that for personal profiles because Instagram hasn't allowed us to do that through their application protocol. So they're actually even favoring it through how the product is developed and how people like us can support them and support you. So I think it's definitely worth doing if you haven't already switched over to that. There's other features that you wouldn't necessarily like use every day either, like carousel posts, stories, polls. We'll kind of talk about that a little bit more later too. IGTV, highlights, ads. So kind of getting out of that box of just thinking about like, you know, it would be great is if I posted on Instagram normal feed a couple times this month. It's kind of looking at what are different ways that you can kind of build your presence on Instagram and what are different things you could try. And everything that I've learned through my career and doing social media is that everything is an experiment. And a lot of times I have a theory about what's going to work and it's wrong until I actually try it out. And I'm like, oh, I didn't expect that this was going to be as successful as it was. And it's not always about necessarily the vanity metrics, especially when you're working with businesses. It's so important to take a look at your analytics behind what you're doing. So not only did, this post maybe get a lot of likes, but did anybody click to our profile or click to maybe our link in bio that we're using on Instagram to actually check out the content that we're talking about? Did that cause them to sign up for our product, make a purchase? Those sorts of metrics often don't directly correlate to likes and engagement, I find. So it's just really important to take a good look at your analytics before you decide your strategy going forward. So post to Instagram stories every single day. This probably seems like a really overwhelming one, especially when I've worked with students at Mount Royal. Everyone's like, it's lucky for me if I can post once a week, and now you're telling me to post every day to stories for business. The way to really do this now, you can actually use Instagram stories scheduling if you are using a software company. So it's something like Later. You could plan it out like once a week or once every 2 weeks and schedule your stories in advance, and then, not worry about it as much, so it's not something you're having to constantly do. But also, like, as you start to use your Instagram account more and use your stories more, you'll also see people tagging you in their stories more, which you can repost and use as perfect content too. So the more you kind of get posting, the more you're going to get tagged as well. So keep that in mind. It's also the best way to build a consistent, engaged following in terms of even just thinking about things like if I'm posting on Instagram stories and I'm using a hashtag around even this conference, the fact that that's going to be seen by all the people following this conference that are not necessarily following your account is just a really great exposure opportunity. And people really do that. They're in the app like following hashtags and seeing things like that. So I think it's an awesome discovery platform. The other thing is, it's a really programmatic thing. So if you think about like the TV shows that you like and things that you like to do consistently, people really like to be in a space where they have a few accounts they're following and they're kind of checking up on them every day. And the more that they're viewing your stories, the higher up in their personal algorithm your feed will become. Or your stories will become. So the more you kind of capture that audience, the more likely they are to stay and come back and be really engaged with your brand. So definitely something to consider. And a lot of this is trying to find themes or ways and things to talk about is a lot of the hard part of this. So it's like, it's all well and good to say, I want to post on Instagram stories every day, but it's really hard to create fresh new ideas every single day too. So you'll see a lot of people that will theme content around specific days of the week so that they have like these themes that they can really build on. That's one way to do it. But I think as you go over time, you'll start to see that actual creating content and having ideas gets easier and easier as you go. And then, so I think we already talked about like scheduling with the tool. That definitely helps just so you don't have to think about it as much every day. And then refreshing your aesthetic with tools and apps too. So we talked about this a little bit in the beginning of the presentation, but looking at things like, not necessarily like, how can I do this all myself? But for me, it's always like, how can I make my life as easy as possible so I can do social media as a part of what I'm doing, but then I have time to do other things, especially given the situation I think most of you are in, where it's like, you're lucky to have any time to work on social media at all because you're working on your business. So anything that you can do to save yourself time is awesome. The thing that I like the most in terms of like aesthetic is actually being able to batch content. So if we're looking at things like even that last example where we were kind of looking at Postmark and how they had like a lot of beachy photos and they had some cabin photos and they had some photos with beer in it, you wouldn't necessarily want your feed to be like every single photo you put out is like pint, here's some like hops and stuff like that. You kind of want it to be like themed in a sense and make sense over time so that when people are coming back to your Instagram, it tells more of a story than it just kind of being like, here's a bunch of content, we posted it, you're kind of weaving a narrative. The only way to be able to do that is really to plan in advance, because if you don't, you're not really thinking of like, how am I continuing a story? You're just thinking about like, what is my story today? So I think that's kind of when you get to the next level for Instagram, is thinking about it in terms of like, this is the narrative, or this is the campaign, or this is the focus of the moment for us. Like, this is what our business priority is. This is what we kind of are trying to get the word out about, and then planning that. And then the next level of that is obviously to plan it out visually. So with a tool like Later, you can actually drag and drop a whole calendar of like 2 weeks of posts or 3 weeks of posts, and then have it actually show you what that's going to look like through a visual planner. So you can preview exactly what it's going to look like on Instagram, and you're like, you know what, this and this photo don't look good together. You can mix everything around until you get kind of that perfect look that you want. That is super helpful. Like when I figured that out, that kind of changed the game for me, especially like, to be honest with you, when I worked in hockey, we didn't have this stuff yet. So I was just like, hockey picture. Like, I had no idea about aesthetic really until I started working at Sage, and it was so important for that brand. So this will really, really help you out if you look at things like that. So customized branded presets. I mentioned a couple of these before. So Lightroom, really good one. There's a company in South Africa called Over, or Made with Over. Really love them too. They have amazing, basically they're like a Canva competitor. They're going to launch a desktop app too, but everything on right now is you can design crazy stuff just on your phone, and their app is free. Definitely recommend them. Same with A Color Story, Unfold, and Visco. I wouldn't recommend that you use all of them at once. Just check them out, pick your favorite or favorites, maybe one or two, and then kind of move forward from there. I did mention kind of like the no edit for a second. There's a lot of different trends on Instagram that kind of come and go. Last year in 2019, like over editing things and oversaturating things was really popular. Now, I don't know if you know, even just like a lot of the trends from Instagram come from teens. But if you think of like Billie Eilish, I don't really know how to say her name exactly, but right now what's in is like the pared down, like no fuss look that's like, this is just who I am. And that's kind of like come on to Instagram too, where it's like, no bullshit, like this is me. So influencers especially are like picking up on that and kind of trying to be like, this is me. I'm a lot more authentic than I was last year. And so that's kind of carried over to like editing styles. But at the same time, it's kind of gone both ways where like either people are caring a little bit less about that. I think that's still really hard to pull off for brands, especially because it's so difficult in the first place to be like, this is what my visual brand is. And it's such an intentional exercise that I haven't really found a way to do that for business yet, to be honest with you. But if you are kind of building a personal account, that could be useful. There's a lot of like artistic filters going on right now too. So like crazy paint strokes, sparkles, collages, that kind of thing. What used to be popular as well last year would be like monotone feeds. I don't know if you've seen like certain brands. A good example of this would be like Ritual, the vitamin company in the US. They actually still do it because it works so well for them. But they're like a very yellow, like a bright poppy canary yellow brand. And so everything that they do has elements of yellow in it. And then it kind of like goes through the whole feed is like that, and everything is inspired by that. And a lot of different brands were kind of doing that, or they would pick like, this month we're going to just do green and then we're going to do blue. That's kind of like starting to go out of Instagram as a trend too. And what's kind of happening now is there's a lot more like artistic, like throwback filters and stuff like this that are being used. So it's always just like kind of keeping on top. Yeah.
What do you think about the like 9 posts all creating like a brand or a word or something like that?
Yeah. So the question was 9 posts, like a brand grid or some, all creating like a word or almost like that kind of like landing page sort of look, right? Personally, I'm not a fan of that, but I've seen like it be really successful. I think when it works well is if you're launching a company or a new product line and you're really trying to make a visual impact. But in terms of it being like a regular strategy that people use, the problem with it is that the engagement on the actual post that you put out when you're doing that kind of a grid concept is so low that it's kind of embarrassing. Where you're like, oh shit, it's got 9 likes. Like, sweet, everybody loves this. So I don't really like doing it that much because it makes me feel bad as a social media person, like nobody likes me. But like for a new company, it can be like a really kind of effective way to make a splash on something. So I'm a bit mixed on that one. It's a good question. Also, not to like hype later this whole time, but we do have a ton of free stuff that is all like Instagram marketing knowledge. So our blog, which is just later.com/blog. If you ever want to know anything about Instagram, we cover literally everything about it. And in great detail, where it's not just like, hey, this happened, they launched this feature. It's like, they launched this feature. Here's 3 brands that are already killing it with this feature. Here's how you can also do that. So it's a lot more of kind of like a how-to guide. But we have a lot on this stuff with aesthetic. Yeah.
Beyond the blog, do you guys do any sort of workshops, webinars type scenarios?
Yeah, so great question. He was asking if we do like courses, webinars, etc. We do, yeah. That's a huge part of what we do. So later.com/training is where we keep all of that stuff. There's a full course on Instagram aesthetic, for example, on there. There's courses on Instagram stories, IGTV. So we go a lot deeper on the topics. There's like Instagram story for small business that we did with HubSpot. So we're updating those constantly depending on what's going on Instagram too. And that can be really helpful because if you just kind of want to know about one subject in particular, it's a great, fast way to kind of learn about that. And we always collaborate with industry partners and brands that are doing it well so that it's not just us saying it. So the next thing, scheduling Instagram for your best time to post. I don't know if you guys remember this. It's not really that much of a big deal anymore, but years ago, social media and the algorithms were really based on like, you have to post something at the perfect time because then when you do, you're going to get a ton of engagement and then that's going to signal that it's a popular post and then everybody's going to open it up to be seen by more people. That's still happening for sure, but there is no like ground rules on like 3 to 5 p.m. is the best time to post or 1 p.m. It's all completely dependent on your specific account. So I guess an example of that would be for us, because our brand is used by like a global audience, we don't actually have any best time to post that actually makes sense other than we can go through our historical data and we have an algorithm that is available like on our plans that we use that basically calculates like, here's your last 50 posts. This is on Fridays, 1 p.m. seems to be the best time for you to post based on this data. So that's the only way that we know what actually works, but it's a lot easier if your audience is, let's say, just in Vancouver or just in Kelowna, because in those instances, you can kind of be like, okay, well, here's like a consistent time when this seems to be doing really well, which you can tell through your like normal analytics. And usually people are really active on social media, like first thing in the morning before they go to work or when they're having their first coffee, over lunch, and then like around commute times. So those are standard good times to post. But if you actually want more information on that, there's a ton on our site too about like best times to post, how to figure it out, how to kind of look at that for your business. It still does impact things, but I'm kind of seeing this trend decrease a little bit as Instagram kind of becomes more global too. And even for, let's say, like a Vancouver brewery, you may have like a big audience in the UK or something. Like the more you grow your account, the more global your account becomes, and I think the less time specific.
Do you think that's relevant though? Like being like, say for us, we're obviously a fairly competitive market with a lot of breweries on the
Yeah.
ground in BC.
Yeah.
Like engaging in people international. Like we're from Kelowna, for example, and we don't really target even the lower mainland that much.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so is it relevant, like the traffic that you'd be getting from international stuff? Probably not.
It feels good to get a like.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
Like we've got someone in like France liking something from a brewery. How does that impact?
Yeah, it could be too. Like a lot of times for small businesses that have that, it's oftentimes somebody who's actually probably come to your brewery in Kelowna, followed you guys, and then is just like loves you because they had a good experience with you guys and keeps going. But sometimes you can grow these other audiences. I would say like not to focus or cater your content on them unless you have like a strong e-commerce offering that you think like basically is there a way that their engagement would drive a business result? Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. Yeah. So the next thing is kind of finding your optimal posting frequency. So what that means is how much should I post per week, basically, whether it's stories or feed or whatever. And I'm kind of telling you guys like try and post on your feed or stories as much as you can. Feed, I feel like, is kind of decreasing. Like people are sort of decreasing their output on feeds right now, but they're still obviously actively posting. And to be honest, like it really depends. So there's kind of this critical point in Instagram, like once you get over 10,000 followers and you can add links within your stories, it's really going to help you to drive business result through your stories. So once you get there, it may make sense for you to concentrate more on that. Otherwise, through your feed, you're really relying on driving people to your link in your bio. There's a couple different ways to do that. So you can have like your primary website on your bio link, or you can use a tool that is one like link in bio that we have, or you may have seen others like Linktree, similar ones, where basically you can then turn your one Instagram bio link into a clickable Instagram gallery. So whether you're selling like your specific e-com products online, or you just want to drive people to your content marketing, whatever it is, the end game is usually get people off Instagram and onto your other digital properties. So whatever you can do to do that, that will kind of help you to decide like your optimal posting frequency in terms of your focus too, like whether or not you want to focus more on your feed or on your stories. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
For sure.
When you say the goal is to get people off your Instagram into your website or whatever it is,
Yeah.
is that, I just wonder, like, are people looking to websites, are they going to websites for that content delivery, or are they actually going to social media platforms because they can get content there? What's the point of going to a second step when
Yeah.
I have to go
I think
through this?
in beer especially, because there's not much we can really offer online,
Like, we can
right? Just
Yeah.
more content. or
We can
whatever.
give you everything about this beer here.
For
you
sure.
can click through and get it over here, but like that's 2 steps versus 1.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. And it's also, like you said, it totally depends on the industry and what your goal is. A lot of probably the brewing industry is really like that brand building element versus it being something where you are trying to drive that direct traffic off. I think it just depends on the industry itself too. Like for us, a lot of the ways that we convert through our funnel is through content marketing. So a lot of our focus is like, how do we get people off Instagram onto our website? It's the same for a lot of places that do have a strong e-commerce offering. But for you guys, your actual goals with Instagram may be more along the lines of like, how do we actually increase our engagement and following in a really meaningful way that is driving people actually to our location, and how do we track that? So that's a great point. Like, I think it really does depend on what your goals are. But at the same time, like if you do have a way that they can just have that deeper level of engagement with you off of Instagram, I think it will pay back no matter what it is. Even if that's a lot of times for breweries that I've seen specifically, like an example of that would be event attendance would be an awesome goal. So if you're trying to get people from your Instagram feed to actually show up at something, that's a good way to kind of track if your plan's working. Yeah, so then in terms of like what a normal goal would be, let's say you're just starting out like an Instagram strategy for a first time, I would try and hit like, if you can hit posting like 4 or 5 times a week, like that's great. That's awesome. Even like the biggest brands do that. Sometimes like the more that you post, the better your stuff's going to do typically, and the bigger your audience gets. So I would just suggest like scaling up your post rate with your own growth. And then, because like when you want to grow more, the best way to do that is post more, engage more. So you don't really want to be starting out with like a crazy high post rate, because then how are you going to increase that over time? Like the best way to kind of do it is to sort of start to go more and more along as you go. And then at a certain point, I think you kind of find your rhythm with how much to post. The main thing is test and find out what works for you. So for in that example with like, maybe your goal for Instagram isn't actually getting people to your website, but it's to get people to attend your events and to support your causes, or to maybe even just be interested and buy a specific type. Like let's say you're just launching your IPA or some new thing that you want people to really focus on, and you want to be able to track how did social media affect this launch. So your goals in social can be like so vast, and I think your plan just really has to support that, and then you can track on analytics whether or not you're kind of getting there and what you need to do to make sure you hit your goals. So collaborating with other people in your network is a big way to do this too. So we'll talk a bit more about influencer marketing. This is sort of like community marketing, I guess. So working with people that maybe are like, let's say you're putting together like a mini brewing experience where you and 2 other breweries you really like are offering some kind of promotion for like having somebody visit all 3 of you guys. So kind of thinking of things a little bit out of the box like that, like how can you take the people in your community, work with them directly, and grow both of your communities at the same time. So more like that cooperation versus competition mentality. This is actually like one of the best ways to build your following on Instagram, because if you're working with a brewery that is really similar to you in many ways, their audience is probably going to be your exact target customer. So way more so than maybe an influencer would be, these people that follow your competitors or community members are going to be like the ideal audience for you. So it's the best way to attract people fast. This could be anything from like behind the scenes view, like maybe you guys are working together on a special project that you can kind of both do like takeovers on each other's accounts. You could do contesting, you could do tutorials. There's tons of different kinds of things that you could do, but think of your community members as influential as well, because they really are. And then just kind of like making sure to have some fun with it. Like even in these examples that I'm showing you here, like I showed you all the like big ton like aesthetic stuff earlier. Stories isn't so much like that yet. A lot of it is just kind of about like being in the moment, posting what's really going on, getting people excited about what's happening. So trying to find other people that you can collaborate with on that. BC Ale Trail has been really good with this in terms of like actually working with influencers and micro influencers to get people excited about beer in their regions. But why has Instagram like influencer marketing been so successful? So I think the part of this to remember is that you'll see a bunch of companies that are like, I need to work with the Kardashians or with this huge influencer. And I think that's what people think about influencer marketing. Yeah, you'd like to work with them as well. But the thing is, like, it's not about like finding the person that has the biggest audience ever. It's about finding the person whose audience represents your target customer. So it doesn't even matter if it's at 3,000 people or 5,000 people. For example of this, there's a local company called Meowbox. It's like the Canadian version of BarkBox. Cool company if you have a kitty cat. But their whole thing is that they tried this different influencer marketing campaign strategy where they're like, we're going to get one big shot person, pay them a bunch of money. They have a lot of followers. We're going to get like 10 mid-tier influencers. Maybe they have like anywhere from like 50 to 100,000 followers. So still like a lot on Instagram. And then we're going to get like these people that have anywhere from 500 to, 3,000 followers, not give them anything for participating in it other than like a free tiny kind of gift thing and see what happens. And basically the people that they gave the free tiny gift thing converted way more customers and traffic than the actual big influencers, just because they represented their actual target customer. So kind of keeping that in mind as you're looking to partner up with people. But that said, the other way to look for influencers is really kind of knowing what your aesthetic is and what the look that you're trying to go for is, like finding people that match that, because a lot of deals with influencer marketing, it's not just like, I want this person to post on Instagram and tag my company in it, but it's also like a two-way deal. So a lot of these that I've negotiated are, I want you to post about this campaign on your stories and feed, but I also want you to provide me with 10 to 15 photos that I can use, videos of this and this and this that I can use on ours, and that's all in the agreement that you make with them. So just making sure that they're a visual match for what you're trying to do as well. So Instagram stories highlights, the reason I show you this is just like, think of highlights, so at the bottom here, as like your banners on your website or like your permanent sort of thing. So you want these banners or the highlights here to be what drives whatever the top line goals are for your social. So whether that's having people go to your website or having people like see a gallery of what your brewery looks like, whatever you think converts the best for you should be within your first sort of landing page with Instagram, because many people are going to be discovering you guys for the first time on Instagram, like way more than ever. If somebody hears of anything, that's the first place they go. They're not going to go to your website. They're going to go to your Instagram first, see if it looks cool, if people are following it, if anyone they know is following it. People are really influenced by that. So just making sure that your profile is set up for that sort of like first impression. And then IGTV, this is tricky, to be honest. Is anyone using IGTV here right now? So hardly anyone, which represents, oh, there you go. That represents an average thing. So like even meeting with Instagram and kind of talking to them about it, that's kind of their goal right now, is to make IGTV seem less intimidating. Because I think for some reason, like the way the format is and filming for it and how unique it is has really stopped people from using it. But at the same time, like they've put so much investment into what they're doing in IGTV that brands are seeing a lot of value out of it. So the lift that happened after, I don't know if you guys remember when they like started showing IGTV previews in feed, that caused like a dramatic increase in people's views. So that's actually now made it worthwhile. Like if you want to consider investing some time into, the other thing about it is that it's something else. So if somebody lands on your page and like, oh, I went through a couple of your highlights, I saw your feed, oh, they have an IGTV, and it's like right at the beginning of your profile, and you can have that be some kind of like a cool experience. I think that really does help convert your audience. So even if you can just have a goal for this year, like I'm going to create one, I think that's still definitely like a worthwhile project, and it just has to be like a 60-second video. Again, if you're looking for resources on that and how to do it, I would suggest coming to our blog to check that out. We walk through like step by step exactly how to do it, and it's not as hard or intimidating as you think. Yeah.
What's IGTV? Where like read backstories for basics?
Oh yeah. So what is IGTV? Good question. So basically, it's the difference between, there's Instagram videos that can live in your normal feed that are just videos. And then IGTV is basically like your branded channel of videos. So it's much more of like almost like a YouTube creator's experience, where it's like a full bleed video. It lives on your profile. It has to be 60 seconds or more. And it's almost like your little mini sort of like talk show, but it can be about anything. Most brands do kind of use it as like a talk show type of thing.
Yeah, is most people using it as more of a casual, organic talk show first person, or more of a curated video, from a business corporate video?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've definitely seen more the talk show style than anything up to this point. So a couple brands that are listed on this slide here, worth checking out. They've had some of the most success with it. So USA Today, the Fader is like the music version, really cool stuff. High Snobiety, or High Snob, my personal favorite Instagram actually. But they're like kind of, there's a mix in there of like in-depth curated content. Like obviously these brands are not like us, like they do have the creative team. So some of their stuff is going to be like a little bit like, whoa, I can't do that. But the talk show stuff, I think it's like looking at the formatting of that and being like, okay, that is actually something that is doable. So I really like that. And it can be like a behind the scenes interview with your brewer, or it could be like an in-depth thing about something specific that you're doing or your new campaign and that kind of idea. So it can be more of a casual thing, but it is really that like deeper dive experience and something that you think maybe has a bit more permanence. Because sometimes you think of like a video that is on stories or is on maybe your grid, it's like, here's something that's happening today. And I think IGTV is more like, this is an intentional thing that we want to live on. So almost more like what you'd put on YouTube normally. Yeah.
It seems like remarkably similar to like Instagram story highlights, though. Like,
Yeah.
really are your highlights and like other.
Yeah, I think like that's a really good question. Like the differences that I've seen with like highlights and in IGTV is that a lot of times highlights are actually like designed things. Like for us specifically, like a lot of our highlights are intentional designed pieces of like graphic design, basically. And a lot of times that's common for highlights because you're just trying to drive to like that business result I was talking about. IGTV is still a lot more organic, where you'll actually see it usually being people being interviewed or people talking and kind of being a part of something. And then there's a lot of people that do random stuff on there. Like The most similarity I can really draw to it, I guess, for example, like the person that they hired to head up IGTV was the former head of creators on YouTube. So the experience is very, very similar there. It's kind of more like somebody who's like a vlogger would love IGTV. But so you just kind of have to think of yourself as a brand vlogger when you're using that. And then the last thing I'll leave you with, and then we can open it up for any questions that you guys have, is just talking about polls and Instagram stories here. So how many of you guys have like answered any polls lately? Yeah, so like way more people than you think like answering polls. It's almost like, why do these quizzes on Facebook do so well? Like, how much do I look like Will Smith? Like, people just like to answer things. So like really take advantage of this and try and make it work for your business to actually find out like, what do people want from me? Like, what are they going to buy? Like, what are these things? Like, this is your best social intelligence tool, is just getting people to vote on things, asking for answers, getting ideas, but also just straight up, even if you don't really have a question and you're just trying to promote something, it's a great way to do that. So just kind of remembering that. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, like saying, what do you want us to pour tomorrow? Like this or this, like perfect example of how to kind of create a poll, which is sort of like, you're just asking people to be involved in your actual experience. So I think that's like the best way that you can do it. Especially for your business. I think like if you take something away, like just try this, see how it works for you. Cause it's like the easiest thing to do as well in terms of like creating a simple poll. All you need is like a photo behind it. You can just try and see how it works. And I think you'll find that it's a lot more successful than you maybe bargained for. So something that you can kind of work into like your regular programming for social media as well. Even these guys, like just asking things like, do you want us to post up more on IG stories or IG posts, or do you want us to do IGTV, or like, do you want to see more behind the scenes content from us? Do you want to see, like, kind of asking for the content and the engagement there so that you can actually provide what people are looking for? And then that's the end of like my overall tips, but you guys have had some awesome questions. I'm more than happy to kind of answer anything else that came from that session. And then if you don't want to ask in this big group, I'll hang around after too, and we could grab a beer or something and chat about it. But please feel free to add me on LinkedIn. If you ever want to follow up or have a question about social, I'm more than happy to chat with you. That's kind of the best way to get me there. Later, if you're looking for our stuff, is Later Media on most social, but otherwise is later.com, and that's kind of where you'll find like our blog, free training, etc. Later also has like a free version of most of the tools that I talked about in this presentation. Like some of them are on our paid plans, but we have like a wicked free plan. So if you just want to try some of this stuff, like Visual Planner and auto posting, you can do that. And we're more than happy to basically just help out as many small businesses as we can. So yeah, and thanks so much for the opportunity to chat with you guys. So thanks.